When Jesus invites himself to the home of Zacchaeus, why do the people grumble? Shouldn't they be rejoicing that someone who is despised is being restored? Or is something else going on? Do they really want what Jesus is doing? In this series, we're discovering what it means to be a disciple. And to do this, we are using the encounter between Jesus and Zacchaeus as our blueprint. In this episode, we're going to find out why the people grumbled and what this means for us today. Hello, I'm Remo Bierepot from Caleb's Journal, where we explore the Bible in search of practical applications for expressing the kingdom of God in our lives today. To accompany this series, we've created a free downloadable study guide that you can access by clicking on the link in the description box below. So let's get started. In our previous episode, we have seen that by climbing into the sycamore fig tree, Zacchaeus was taking ownership of his status as a defrauder. And by Jesus calling him out of the tree and inviting himself to Zacchaeus' home, he was restoring Zacchaeus to his community. But when this was happening, the onlookers grumbled. In this episode, we are going to examine why there would be discontent if a sinner is restored. Shouldn't that be something to celebrate? Let's read the passage in Luke 19, verses 5 through 7. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled, "He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." So who were the people who grumbled? As we discovered in our first episode, Jericho was a winter resort town for the aristocracy of Jerusalem. This would have included the priests and Levites who would live in Jericho when they were not required to attend to their duties at the temple in Jerusalem. About 12,000 priests and Levites are estimated to have lived there in the first century. Jericho also played a central role in the highly lucrative balsam trade and was well connected, so the city would have been home to the well-to-do merchant class. So we can expect that those in the crowd would have included priests, Levites, and merchants. Even though these people would have been ideologically opposed to what Zacchaeus stood for, and therefore despised him, they also would have benefited from the system that he represented, and would therefore have worked their relationship with Zacchaeus to their maximum advantage. The high priest presiding over the temple in Jerusalem was appointed by Rome. He was not independent. You could say his position was somewhat compromised, as the security of his position depended on remaining in the good graces of Rome. The merchant class also benefited greatly from Rome, as it facilitated trade. In addition to these political considerations, the tax farming method lent itself to corruption, and it would be safe to assume that the elite would have had special preferential relationships in place with the chief tax collector. So it was in the interests of the elite not to upset the status quo. In our previous episode, we saw that Jesus coming to Zacchaeus' home represents the symbolic death and resurrection of Zacchaeus, the death of his old nature and his adoption of a new one. Something fundamentally changed for Zacchaeus when Jesus came to his home. We find a clue to what this fundamental change was in the words that the onlookers spoke. They said, "He has gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." Here we see that Jesus is described as a guest. The Greek word that has been translated as guest here is the word kataluo. Kataluo is a word that means to dismantle or to disassemble. It is used in the context of dismantling or disassembling buildings, laws, or social movements. With this understanding, we can read verse 7 as, "And when they saw it, they all grumbled, 'He has gone in to dismantle the man who is a sinner.'" So the people were grumbling not because of who Zacchaeus was, but because of what Jesus was doing to him. They were grumbling because the restoration of Zacchaeus was complete and included the dismantling of his operation, and this threatened their own position. As chief tax collector, Zacchaeus was all about enforcing the people's validation of Rome's central claim, that Caesar is the Son of God, the high priest. This is what Zacchaeus' operation was all about. The claim that Caesar is the Son of God equates to the claim that man is God, and we can trace the origin of this claim all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where man ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil so that he could become like God. This is the original sin. This is what Jesus came to dismantle. As Jesus restored Zacchaeus, everything about his old nature was dismantled, so that his new nature could emerge. Zacchaeus changed from being a defrauder of God to being a servant of God. As I've been studying the Zacchaeus narrative, I discovered that many people believe that Zacchaeus retained his position as chief tax collector after his encounter with Jesus. However, that he now adopted Christian principles to his profession, acting honourably and without corruption. Whilst this view does, to a large extent, address the defrauding that was being carried out by Zacchaeus against his fellow countrymen, it does not address the defrauding of God himself. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." Both Caesar and Jesus were claiming to be the Son of God and the High Priest. When Jesus restores us, it is not purely an academic exercise. It is not something which only occurs inside our minds or only applies to the spiritual side of our lives. Restoration causes a radical shift in our entire life, in how we interact with the world around us, because restoration changes the foundational premise by which we experience our reality. Original sin, the concept of man as God, has been overcome. I believe Zacchaeus' conversion was complete, and that he was fully in. He became fully committed to the God of Israel. Only by being fully committed could he fulfill his destiny, something that would be impossible to do if he still had one foot inside each of the two camps. In this episode, we have seen that the crowd grumbled because of what Jesus did rather than of who Zacchaeus was. Whilst the crowd did not agree with what the old Zacchaeus stood for, they realised that when he was fully restored, their own security and position was threatened, and this is why they grumbled. Today, we see the same pattern happening. As Christians, we also seek security. However, to whom do we look in order to obtain this security? Do we seek our security from the very thing that Jesus came to dismantle, our modern-day version of Rome? And are we therefore a part of the grumbling crowd? Have we compromised our faith to accommodate society and thereby retain access to its benefits? Or do we look to Jesus himself for this security? As we do so, we should expect the same response from the crowd that Zacchaeus experienced. We should expect that they will grumble, as the very thing that they derived their security from is being threatened. In our next and final episode of this series, we are going to see what the destiny of Zacchaeus was and how he fulfilled it, and we will discover what this means for us today. Thanks for watching. We've prepared a free study guide to accompany this video. There is a link on screen to where you can download it. It's also in the description box below. If you found this video helpful, then please share it with your family and friends and give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to see more videos like this, then please subscribe to our channel. Thank you, and we will see you in the next episode.